and this is from the SAT number 9. This is April 2017 QAS test. And the question for 47 reads, the passage indicates that the structure of this algae consists of components that something. So the passage indicates. This kind of question here sort of falls in the category of those types of questions that begin with something like according to the passage indicates, based on the passage. And these are the types of questions that very specifically tend to focus on one single sentence within the text. And basically our habit for almost any question on the SAT needs to be go back to the answer choices, find a sentence or a couple of sentences, a small group of sentences at the most, and use that to answer our question. But I find that in these types of questions, we want to look even more specifically at what the questions are, more specifically for a single sentence. So question 47, we're looking for something about the structure of this algae. So the structure of this algae. And the way that we can find the sentence to answer this is to do a couple of things. So one, if we followed along from last video, we know that I think it was answer choice C that was correct for this one, and that basically a lot of these are referring to this group of things here, 23, 26, all that. And then we have this text down here, which is referencing line 32. And so using the question order rule, we can predict that it's likely that our text is going to come somewhere after the very beginning of the text, after maybe lines 10 or so, all the way up to line 32, and somewhere in that space, we're likely to find our text talking about the structure of this algae. Not necessarily so, there are exceptions, but more than likely we'll be able to find that. So let's maybe start in the second paragraph. We can keep scanning. We notice this is still talking about sort of the implications of the findings. This is talking about the initial research that Martone did. Then here we're talking about more about the algae itself and kind of referencing some of the structure. And it's actually this sentence here, starting in line 30, that is going to be the best text for us. And in lines 30 it says the calcified or rigid-bodied seaweed has multiple non-calcified joints that make it flexible yet strong enough to handle that setting. So here we're talking about the rigid-bodied seaweed. We're talking about its joints and how they're flexible or yet strong. So this is the best thing to tell us about the structure of this algae, and it fits our rule perfectly, right? Here's lines 34 that are referenced up here. So, or maybe it was 32. In any case, yeah, I think it was line 34 that are referenced here. So this is our text, and basically what it's telling us is that the seaweed, the structure, is that it's calcified and rigid-bodied, meaning it's hardened, but then it has these joints within it that are non-calcified, so they're not hard, and what they do is they make the seaweed flexible, so it's able to bend sort of in the waves that are here. It says they have water velocities exceeding 20 meters per second, and forces exceeding those generated by a hurricane. So it's a very hard-bodied seaweed, but then it has these joints that make it able to be flexible yet strong. So flexible yet strong. So we want an answer choice that's going to capture that. Answer choice A says that the structure consists of components that change density in response to external conditions. So nowhere in our text, and really nowhere in the passage either, does it talk about how the structure of this algae is able to change density. So for that reason, we can get rid of A. B says protect the cell interior from exposure to seawater. This is an answer choice a lot of students choose because the text does talk about how there's all these underwater forces and high velocity. So it makes sense in our heads to say, well, the structure is protecting the internal, the cell interior. However, this answer choice is too specific without enough evidence to support it. So nowhere does it talk about the cell interior and how it needs to be protected by these velocities, even if that does make intuitive sense to us. And moreover, it's not about protecting them from the seawater. And so once we find our text, and really once we find the location where they're talking about the algae in general terms, we need to just focus on the actual texts that are said. And because nothing is mentioned about the cell interior and how the structure of this seaweed or this algae protects it, we should get rid of answer choice B. C says that this algae consists of components that can regenerate as the seaweed colony matures. Again, this is a pretty specific claim and not one that is supported by the passage because nowhere does it talk about the seaweed or this algae regenerating. So for that reason, we can get rid of C, which is going to leave us with answer choice D. And answer choice D says that these components operate together to allow for suppleness. And that is what the passage says. So suppleness here basically just means flexibility. So it says it has parts that work together to make it flexible, and that matches here. Calcified or rigid-bodied parts, but non-calcified joints that make it flexible enough to handle that setting. So for that reason, I'm going to choose answer choice D for question 47.